Most people stay poor not because they lack intelligence, but because they worship safety like a false god. They hoard, they hesitate, they clutch their coins as if caution were a virtue, when in truth, it is the quiet assassin of wealth. Let me tell you something. Machiavelli himself would whisper into your ear if he were alive today. Fortune favors the bold, but only if the bold are willing to bleed coins first. Every empire, every dynasty, every powerful man who carved his name into history understood one principle. Money is not meant to be protected. It is meant to be deployed. Caesar didn't conquer Gaul by saving denarii under his mattress. He borrowed, spent, and risked his way into glory. He understood that resources unused are resources wasted, like soldiers who never see battle. The poor man's illusion is that saving makes him safe. The Machiavellian truth is that saving too much makes him weak, because the moment you treat money as something to protect instead of something to weaponize, you have already lost. You've declared fear as your ruler. Think of your money as a battalion. If you keep your troops locked behind castle walls, they grow soft, idle, and useless. But if you send them into strategic campaigns, investments, education, alliances, influence, they conquer new territory for you. Yes, some soldiers fall, some campaigns fail. But the general who never fights loses by default. Let's be honest. How many years have you spent waiting until the right time to invest in yourself? Waiting to have enough? Waiting to feel ready? Meanwhile, the one currency you can never reclaim burns away like a fuse. While you hesitate, others are buying power, reputation, and opportunity. They're not smarter than you. They're simply less afraid to take risks. When I was younger, I used to think discipline meant deprivation. I saved every cent, refused dinners, skipped travel, lived like a monk. And what did I gain? Anxiety, smallness, the sickening realization that I was hoarding potential instead of expanding it. My breakthrough came when I spent more than I could afford on mentorship. It felt like suicide at the time, but it bought me access to people and ideas that rewired my mind and tripled my income in a year. That was the first time I understood. Spending strategically is not loss, it's leverage. Look through history's greatest minds. Napoleon spent fortunes building the most disciplined army in Europe. Churchill risked political capital and personal ruin to fund Britain's defense when everyone else wanted appeasement. Alexander burned his ships upon arrival in Persia, cutting off retreat, forcing total commitment. These men weren't reckless. They were calculatingly audacious. They understood that to rise above mediocrity, one must first destroy the illusion of safety. So here's the brutal truth. You cannot accumulate your way to power. You must invest your way there. The question is not, how much can I save? But where can I deploy my resources to multiply my influence, my skill, my reach? Money sitting still is decaying. Money in motion is alive, evolving, compounding, expanding your dominion. Ask yourself, are you a hoarder or a conqueror? Do you guard your gold like a frightened peasant, or do you wield it like a king planning a campaign? Because every dollar you clutch in fear is a soldier you've chained in the dungeon of your own hesitation. While others hesitate, you must act. While others pray for certainty, you must strike with precision. The battlefield of wealth does not reward the careful, it rewards the strategic. So, the first law of Machiavellian prosperity is simple. Spend to expand. Spend with intent. Spend as a weapon. Because if you're not using money to buy power, it's using you to preserve weakness. And the real question you must confront before we go further is this. How much longer will you let fear dictate your financial strategy? There was a time when I thought frugality was strength. I used to believe that saving every dollar made me disciplined, that denying myself luxuries meant I was destined for greatness. I called it strategy. But in truth, it was fear polished, disguised, and worshipped as virtue. I remember standing in a dim apartment, the kind with flickering lights and a refrigerator that hummed louder than my own confidence. I was 24, working long hours at a job that drained the life out of me. I made just enough to survive, not enough to live. And yet, I refused to spend. I watched others invest in courses, mentors, business ventures, and I mocked them in silence. They're reckless, I told myself. I'm being smart. But smart didn't feel powerful. Smart felt small. It felt like slow decay. Every time I denied myself an opportunity because of cost, I told my subconscious, "You don't deserve to grow." That's the hidden poison of poverty, thinking it masquerades as prudence, but it's really self-doubt in a suit and tie. Then came the breaking point. I was invited to a private mastermind, $5,000 to attend. That number hit me like a spear. It was more than 2 months' rent. My logical brain screamed, "Impossible." But something deeper whispered, "You've been defending poverty for years. Maybe it's time to fight for wealth." So I did something I'd never done before. I spent money I didn't have. I maxed out my card. I remember trembling as I pressed confirm payment. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a declaration of war against my own hesitation. That event changed my life. Not because it was magical, but because it forced me to move differently. When you spend beyond comfort, your brain stops tolerating stagnation. You must rise to match your investment. Within 6 months, I had tripled my income. Within a year, I was mentoring others on the very thing I used to fear: strategic spending. But here's what most people don't understand. It wasn't the course that made me rich. It was the commitment. Spending forced me to evolve. It was psychological warfare, me versus the part of myself that played small. History repeats this truth endlessly. Julius Caesar was once so deep in debt that his creditors threatened to ruin him. Instead of retreating, he doubled down, borrowing even more to fund his political campaign in Rome. It was a catastrophic risk, but it paid off. That debt became the foundation of his empire. He knew what most men never grasp: power demands investment before return. Alexander the Great did the same when he paid his soldiers double during his campaigns in Asia. His advisors called it madness, but Alexander understood morale as currency. He spent not just gold, but confidence, and bought loyalty that could not be defeated. When I look back now, I realize money isn't the resource you are. Money is simply the mirror reflecting how deeply you believe in your own future. If you spend timidly, you think timidly. If you invest boldly, you think like a strategist. The painful irony? The people who refuse to spend because they're protecting themselves end up spending far more on missed opportunities, wasted time, and a lifetime of mediocrity. Every dollar they save buys them another year of staying the same. Ask yourself honestly, what have your savings truly saved you from? Growth? Challenge? Evolution? How many chances have you let slip because the price tag scared you more than stagnation did? In the Machiavellian sense, the battlefield isn't external, it's internal. You're not fighting the market or the economy or your upbringing. You're fighting the version of you that believes fear is wisdom. While others count coins, you must count conquests. Because no empire was built by someone who asked, "What's the cheapest way?" So here's your challenge. Spend on something that terrifies you, something that forces evolution. Whether it's mentorship, a new business, or a skill that expands your reach, stop trying to stay comfortable. Comfort is the currency of the average. And remember this: every dollar you spend with courage declares independence from the smallness that once ruled you. Here's the truth that history has shouted for centuries: wealth has never belonged to the cautious. It belongs to the strategists, the ones who understand that money is not merely a means of comfort but a tool of control. To a Machiavellian mind, money is not a possession. It is a weapon, sharp, expendable, and meant to be used. Machiavelli himself, writing in The Prince, warned rulers against excessive caution. He observed that the most dangerous mistake a leader could make was to appear too fearful of loss. Why? Because fortune, the fickle goddess he personified, favors those who act decisively, not those who hesitate. It is better to be impetuous than cautious, he wrote, for fortune is a woman, and if you wish to master her, you must treat her boldly. Every great leader in history embodied that principle. Consider Lorenzo de' Medici, the man to whom the prince was dedicated. The Medici family didn't hoard wealth, they deployed it. They built cathedrals, funded armies, financed artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Their fortune bought not just influence, but immortality. Florence became the center of the Renaissance, not by saving gold, but by investing it in human potential and political dominance. Contrast that with the timid merchants who feared risk. Their names are forgotten, their fortunes vanished. Because history does not remember the cautious, it only remembers the conquerors. This philosophy runs deeper than economics. It is about power itself. Money is political. It amplifies voice, commands respect, and bends circumstances. Napoleon Bonaparte understood this perfectly. When he seized power, France was drowning in debt. His advisors urged austerity to save what we can, they said. Napoleon rejected it. He spent massively on rebuilding the military, re-engineering infrastructure, and rewarding loyalty. To outsiders, it looked reckless, but he knew that perception of strength is strength itself. His spending projected dominance, and soon, Europe trembled before him. Machiavellian strategy dictates this. Use wealth to create influence before using influence to create wealth. That is the reversal the masses never grasp. They wait for money before acting. The powerful act to create more money. Think of it this way. Every empire operates on the principle of investment before return. A general spends lives to win territory. A merchant spends capital to capture markets. A ruler spends favors to secure loyalty. Every act of power is a transaction risk for dominance. And yet, in modern life, most people treat money like a fragile relic. They save obsessively, invest timidly, and consume thoughtlessly. They've forgotten that true wealth doesn't grow by protection, it grows by movement. Just as stagnant water breeds disease, stagnant money breeds decay. Even Winston Churchill, during Britain's darkest hour, understood this paradox. The nation was nearly bankrupt during World War II. Yet he refused to cut defense spending. "You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth," he said. Instead, he demanded more resources, more production, more risk, because he knew survival was not for the thrifty, but for the bold. That decision not only saved Britain, but redefined its destiny. So let's strip this philosophy to its iron core. Money is influenced in disguise. Whoever controls its direction controls reality. Hoarding weakens power. What you refuse to circulate, you eventually lose. Calculated spending is dominance expressed through economics. Most people misunderstand Machiavelli. They think he preached deceit. But what he really taught was strategic perception. To appear powerful, one must act powerful. And in this world, money is the theater of strength. Ask yourself, when you spend, do you spend like a peasant buying comfort, or like a ruler buying control? Are your transactions expressions of fear, or declarations of power? While others play defense, you must play conquest. Money is not for surviving, it's for expanding your reach, your influence, your dominion. Because in the Machiavellian economy, the one who risks wisely commands. The one who saves timidly obeys. And here lies the question that bridges us to the next phase of this strategy. If money is the weapon, do you know where your battlefield truly is? Here's the paradox most people never solve. The path to wealth is paved not by preservation, but by productive loss. Every act of strategic spending is a calculated sacrifice, a small defeat engineered to secure a greater victory. The Machiavellian mind understands this instinctively. You must give to grow. Let's anchor this in evidence. Financial studies from Yale, Harvard, and the London School of Economics all point to the same brutal conclusion. People who invest aggressively and early outperform savers by exponential margins over time, even when they make mistakes. The data is merciless. Those who hesitate lose to those who deploy. Why? Because compounding is not just a financial phenomenon, it's a psychological one. When you spend strategically, you activate urgency, accountability, and higher-level thinking. You force evolution. This is the Machiavellian advantage. While others hoard to feel safe, you spend to create leverage. Take Andrew Carnegie, one of history's richest industrialists. He began life as a poor Scottish immigrant working in a factory. His secret wasn't luck, it was reinvestment. Carnegie spent virtually every dollar he earned building steel mills, hiring experts, and acquiring technology. He lived modestly for years, not out of frugality, but focus. His money was always in motion, buying productivity, not pleasure. By 1901, he sold his company for $480 million, equivalent to over $15 billion today. Carnegie later said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." He didn't mean money was evil. He meant that wealth must circulate. To hoard it is to betray your potential. Now, contrast that with the average person today. They earn, they save, they protect, but their money earns them nothing. Their dollars sit idle, depreciating silently under inflation's blade. They call it security, but it's just stagnation. The truth? The longer you wait to spend strategically, the more expensive your fear becomes. Let's break this down in Machiavellian terms. Every resource has three potential states: dormant, unspent, unused, unleveraged, dead, deployed, strategically invested in tools, networks, or education, alive, wasted, consumed without purpose, lost. The masses swing between dormant and wasted. The elite live in the deployed state. They treat money like energy, directing it toward expansion, not comfort. In modern psychological research, this aligns with what's called the investment mindset. Studies show that individuals who view spending as investment, rather than consumption, exhibit higher risk tolerance, greater innovation, and long-term wealth accumulation. It's not their intelligence that sets them apart. It's their willingness to trade short-term certainty for long-term control. Let's bring it back to Napoleon, the master strategist. He understood that resources must always move toward advantage. When he reorganized the French military, he didn't cut costs. He redirected them. He spent heavily on logistics, roads, and supplies to create faster mobilization. That spending gave him a tactical edge so decisive that entire nations fell before they could even mobilize. He didn't buy luxury, he bought speed, adaptability, and fear in the hearts of his enemies. And that's the core lesson. Money spent strategically is not expense, it's weaponization. You must ask yourself, what skill, network, or tool could multiply your income or influence tenfold if you invested in it today? What are you losing by refusing to act? How many months, years, or opportunities have already expired while you hesitated? Because every day you delay, you pay the most expensive tax of all, the tax of lost momentum. The numbers prove it. In a 30-year span, an investor who began at 25 and earned a 7% annual return ended with over $1 million by retirement. Start just 10 years later with the same contribution. You end with half that. That's not theory, that's arithmetic brutality. While others worship safety, you must worship motion. Because wealth is not created by protecting capital, it's created by positioning capital. So here's your commandment for this phase. Stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "What will it cost me not to?" And as we prepare for the next section, remember this truth. Money is the servant of the bold and the master of the timid. The next move is to learn how to scale that boldness into dominance. Here's the Machiavellian axiom few dare to speak aloud. Spending is not the opposite of saving. Spending is the art of conquest. The weak spend emotionally. The powerful spend strategically, with intent so sharp it cuts through uncertainty itself. In this section, we go deeper. We move from theory to architecture, the blueprint that transforms money into momentum and momentum into power. Let's start with the modern battlefield, business. Look at Jeff Bezos, a man often described as obsessive, even ruthless. In the 1,990 seconds when Amazon was bleeding cash, analysts called it insanity. He was spending millions without profit, reinvesting every dollar into logistics, warehouses, technology, and data infrastructure. The financial world mocked him. He'll burn out, they said. He'll collapse. 2 decades later, Amazon controlled the global supply chain. Bezos wasn't wasting money. He was buying time, dominance, and inevitability. His spending wasn't reckless. It was Machiavellian precision. He understood what Niccolo himself taught. Princes appear fragile if necessary, but always positioned for supremacy. Now, look at the data. According to studies from Stanford and MIT, companies that reinvest a minimum of 20% of revenue into innovation outperform their competitors by an average of 45% in long-term market value. That's not intuition. That's measurable warfare. The same principle applies to personal wealth. Those who invest aggressively in their own skill, influence, or network consistently dominate those who save passively. But let's step beyond the spreadsheets into psychology, because the real battlefield is not financial, it's internal. Spending wisely rewires your brain from fear to control. It builds agency. When you spend strategically, whether it's hiring a coach, acquiring knowledge, or building a business, you send a subconscious signal. I am in motion. I am expanding. And the human mind aligns behavior with identity. Spend like a conqueror long enough, and you start thinking like one. I learned this when I launched my first venture. I had $10,000 in savings. Instead of guarding it, I spent every cent on branding, mentorship, and marketing. My friends called it suicide. I called it pressure. Within months, I was forced to adapt, to sell, to lead. The discomfort of that financial risk became the crucible that forged a new identity. That's the secret no one tells you. Spending forces evolution. When your comfort is gone, creativity takes its place. And this is not new wisdom. Hernan Cortez, upon landing in Mexico in 1519, ordered his ships burned. His men panicked. No retreat, no escape. But Cortez understood human psychology. With no path backward, they fought like gods. Within 2 years, an empire fell. The same principle applies to money. When you eliminate the option to retreat, when your investment demands action, you access levels of power that comfort will never unlock. Even Warren Buffett, the so-called sage of restraint, is not truly cautious. His philosophy? Opportunities come infrequently. When it rains gold, put out the bucket, not the thimble. That's not saving, that's strategic aggression. So how do you turn spending into an empire? 3 Machiavellian laws. Spend to expand capacity. Buy tools, systems, and skills that multiply output. Never buy distractions. Spend to build alliances. Money buys access. Access buys opportunity. Opportunity buys leverage. Spend to force growth. Commit to investments that terrify you. Fear is the compass pointing toward evolution. Ask yourself now, when was the last time you spent money that made you uncomfortable, that demanded you become someone greater, just to justify the expense? That's the dividing line between the fearful and the powerful. While others chase discounts, you must chase dominance. While they cling to safety, you must buy exposure. The currency of kings is risk. The currency of peasants is comfort. Because in this world, money is movement, and movement is power. So the next time you hesitate before an investment, remember this. You're not deciding whether to spend money, you're deciding whether to remain small. And, as we move forward, understand this. Even the most strategic investments mean nothing if fear still commands your mind. The next step is not financial, it's psychological warfare. Every man who seeks power must first conquer his oldest enemy, the timid voice within, the one that whispers, "Be careful. What if you fail? What if you lose everything?" That voice has destroyed more empires before they began than any external enemy ever could. Make no mistake, the greatest resistance to wealth is not in the market, not in the system, not in the competition. It is in your own conditioning. You were taught since childhood that safety equals virtue, that risk equals recklessness. You were trained to preserve instead of to command. That's the first chain you must break. When I started my first company, I nearly sabotaged myself with hesitation. I would overanalyze every decision, terrified of losing the little I had. Every time I thought about spending money on growth advertising, training, and partnerships, I heard the echo of my parents. Be responsible. Don't take unnecessary risks. Their definition of responsibility was survival. Mine had to become domination. The day I realized that was the day everything shifted. Responsibility isn't avoiding risk, it's mastering it. The Machiavellian doesn't fear the blade, he sharpens it. You see, the human mind has a primitive mechanism. It confuses uncertainty with danger. It's an evolutionary leftover from when stepping into the dark meant being eaten by wolves. But in modern life, the wolves are illusions. They wear the faces of social judgment, temporary loss, and discomfort. None of them can kill you unless you submit. This is why most people stay broke. They crave the illusion of security, not realizing that stagnation is the slowest form of death. Let's turn to history to men who faced real danger and still spent fearlessly. Alexander the Great, at 21, inherited an unstable kingdom and a mountain of enemies. He could have fortified his borders, played defense, saved his resources. Instead, he burned through the treasury funding campaigns into Asia. He spent lavishly on morale, on logistics, on alliances. His generals warned him, "We'll run out of gold," he replied. "Then we'll take theirs." That is the psychology of power expansion as the default setting. Winston Churchill did the same in 1940. The nation was exhausted, broke, and terrified. Parliament wanted to negotiate peace with Hitler. Churchill's reply was a verbal sword. You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. He demanded more planes, more production, more spending. His defiance was madness to some, salvation to history. And here's the modern evidence. Research from the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center found that individuals who take controlled financial risks exhibit higher life satisfaction, resilience, and problem-solving skills. In other words, risk tolerance is not just a financial trait, it's an emotional weapon. But make no mistake, overcoming resistance is not about positive thinking. It's about conditioning your mind through exposure. The same way soldiers train with live rounds to dull fear, you must train your psyche through small, strategic risks. Spend incrementally beyond your comfort zone, a mentor, a skill, a new venture, and watch your capacity for power expand. When I invested my last $2,000 into a consulting mentor, I remember trembling not from the money, but from confronting the identity I had to outgrow. I wasn't paying for information. I was paying to kill the weak version of myself. That's what every strategic expenditure truly is, a financial execution of an outdated identity. Ask yourself, what version of you are you still funding, the conqueror or the coward? How many times have you said, "Not yet," when opportunity knocked, pretending it was logic when it was fear? Are you waiting for certainty or creating it through decisive movement? While others are paralyzed by analysis, you must act. While they seek reassurance, you must embrace volatility. Because Machiavellian mastery isn't about never feeling fear. It's about weaponizing it. Fear, when harnessed, becomes focus. Doubt, when confronted, becomes discipline. So here's your command. Stop worshiping stability. It's a mirage. The only real safety is in dominance, in motion, in evolution, in momentum. And as we prepare for the next stage, understand this. Once you've killed the inner peasant, you must replace him with a strategist. The next section isn't about surviving resistance. It's about building systems of perpetual expansion. At this point, you've seen the battlefield for what it truly is. The war was never about dollars. It was about dominion. You've learned that money is not the goal, but the sword, not the reward, but the weapon. And now, at the summit of this journey, one truth stands above all others. You cannot become rich by thinking like a subject. You must think like a sovereign. Let's strip away every illusion. The world doesn't reward the cautious, the frugal, or the hesitant. It rewards the decisive, those who understand that hesitation is betrayal, that inaction is decay, and that fear is the taxation of the weak. Every fortune in history was born from a moment of deliberate audacity. You want proof? Let's revisit Julius Caesar, standing on the banks of the Rubicon. Behind him, safety, status, a peaceful life as a politician. Ahead of him, treason, war, and the possibility of death. Most men would retreat. Caesar looked to his soldiers and uttered the immortal words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. He crossed the river, broke Roman law, and changed history forever. That one act of a calculated, irreversible commitment transformed him from politician to emperor. That's what crossing your own Rubicon looks like in modern life. Spending not as reaction, but as declaration. When you spend on your evolution, you are declaring war on mediocrity. Let me tell you a personal truth. I remember the day I decided to stop playing the middle game. I had built a comfortable life, consistent income, predictable routines. No real danger, but comfort is the silent coffin of ambition. I could feel the soft erosion of hunger, so I did something that terrified me. I reinvested nearly everything I'd built into scaling my business internationally. I drained accounts that took years to fill. People thought I'd lost my mind, but I hadn't lost my limits. That decision catapulted me into a level of influence and income I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. Because wealth is a mirror, it reflects your willingness to act without guarantees. Look around. The modern world rewards those who invest in expansion. Those who spend to buy competence, who spend to buy access, who spend to buy control. The rest are spectators of their own potential, sitting in the cheap seats of life, clapping for others who dared. And here's the hidden tragedy. Most people will die still rich in excuses but bankrupt in experience. They'll spend decades waiting for the right moment, never realizing that every empire was built by someone who created the moment instead. The Machiavellian doesn't wait for perfect timing. He engineers it. He knows that every delay is a surrender to entropy. So, this is your challenge to your sovereign's oath. Make a ruthless audit of your resources. Identify every dollar, every asset, every ounce of energy that's idle. Dormancy is death. Commit to a campaign of expansion. Decide, right now, one area where you will spend strategically, not impulsively, but decisively to multiply your power. Burn the fallback plan. The ships behind you are illusions. Comfort is the enemy of conquest. Ask yourself, and answer brutally honestly, how many years have I traded my potential for safety? What would my life look like if I invested in it with the same intensity that I fear losing it? Am I willing to risk discomfort today for the throne tomorrow? You already know what the average will do. They'll watch this, nod solemnly, and return to their cages, rationalizing their smallness as prudence. But the rare few, the Machiavellian few, will act. While others dream, you will deploy. While others calculate, you will commit. While others protect, you will conquer. Because the truth is simple and savage, You cannot save your way to sovereignty. You must spend your way to supremacy. So, consider this your Rubicon. Don't cross it timidly. Cross it like Caesar, because on the other side of fear lies empire. And the final question, the one that decides your destiny, is this: will you die defending your savings, or will you live building your kingdom?